Welcome to Nothing Without Us, stories and discussions about meaningful inclusion. We will talk about accessibility, true inclusion, and disability justice with stories, policy updates, discussions, and related commentary on the value of being accessible and inclusive. We believe life should be accessible for everyone, and everyone should be included in all aspects of life. I am your host, Annette Bourbonnier. I am a 70-ish-year-old woman with short gray hair and eyeglasses. I am sitting in a power wheelchair, and my service dog Kirby could show himself at some point during the podcast. This podcast is captioned. Please press the subscribe button at any time during the podcast if you have not already done so. It will not cost you anything, but it will help us make this podcast grow. You are also welcome to make comments in the chat and to give us feedback about what you do or do not like. We especially appreciate a thumbs up. This is another episode of the CripTheVote subseries where we invite office holders and candidates for office to discuss disability issues that may not come up during the regular campaign. So today I'm honored to have Rhode Island State Senator Bridget Valverde from District 35, which includes North Kingstown, East Greenwich, and South Kingstown. She is the Vice Chair of the Senate Committee on Health and Human Services. Welcome, Senator Valverde.
Thank you, Annette. It's wonderful to be here with you today.
Hey. So persons with disabilities represent between 20 and 25% of the U.S. population, and making us the largest minority in the United States. So this is why we're inviting lawmakers and candidates to participate in discussions about disability. So in the 2022 legislature, a bill that you introduced, thank you so much, was passed to eliminate income and asset limits for working persons with disabilities. It was intended to allow them to keep their Medicaid, which is really critical for people with expensive disabilities, while working and earning a decent living. Unfortunately, three things have happened. First, even though this law was supposed to go into effect upon passage, and it was included in the budget that year, the state agency, EOHHS, dragged it out until just a month ago. It just became effective. Second, that same agency named it after an already existing federal program. So while the federal program enables this law, it is different and it's made it very confusing for people. And just to make it even more complicated, the state agency introduced extra rules that are so complex that people with disabilities are sure to err and lose critical benefits. And people who are trying to work and be productive are constantly put under that stress that they're going to lose these critical benefits. How can we, or even can we, address this to remove this burden so that others don't have to carry it?
Sure. Well, so first, I hope you don't mind, I'd love to talk a little bit about the kind of how the bill came about and kind of the process we went through.
Right.
So in January of 2023, a constituent of mine from East Greenwich approached me asking me if we could look into making some changes to the Sherlock plan, which was the existing plan for working Rhode Islanders with disabilities.
Which, by the way, is still effective for people over 65.
It sure is, yeah.
I lose.
Yeah. And he had a son who became quadriplegic after an accident and was making his way into the working world finally in his early 20s, and he was worried, rightfully so, that he would not be able to advance in his career, earn the living that he was capable of earning, without risking his Medicaid benefits that he needed to function on a daily basis.
Right.
And so I was honestly surprised after serving on the Health and Human Services Committee for, at that point, 5 years, that this was the first I was hearing about this program at all. And I think it sort of points to a larger issue that we don't talk about, disability policy enough.
Right.
And lawmakers don't get the information they need sometimes to make change. So that being said, I was very happy to be able to introduce that legislation to remove the asset and income limits by implementing a new program on top of the Sherlock Plan, Ticket to Work, to remove those asset and income limits. We never imagined that we'd be able to get it done in that first year after introduction, but we got it included in the budget, and that money that was included in the budget was really for planning purposes in order to give EUHHS the funds that they needed to be able to submit the state plan amendment and also make the necessary changes that had to be made to the payment system and the central, basically database system, in order to make sure that nobody fell through the cracks, nobody inadvertently lost benefits, and that sort of thing, which unfortunately does take a lot of time. So we're really happy now that there's been a group of stakeholders that have been meeting regularly to talk about kind of how this program can best be rolled out, so as to avoid any unintended consequences. And right now, I'm happy to report that it is undergoing, the system's being tested, and people will be able to realize this new Ticket to Work program very soon.
Right, but they have made the rules very complicated for people with disabilities, which is one of the problems with us dealing with that state agency.
Okay.
Because there are problems with that, their concept. We talked about meaningful inclusion. Let's include this with this. They have policymakers who look at things on paper. They're reluctant to include the lived experience, the voices of those of us who live with it. Because they hire outside consultants and all these people that are actually, supposed experts. But then when it comes to those of us with disabilities talking about it and saying, well, this is how it's going to affect us, this is what's happening when we deal with these other people, these other players, etc., that does not get into the picture. And that's what we refer to as meaningful inclusion. Meaningful inclusion means people with disabilities get a voice. There should be an assumption that we have some understanding of our disability and know what it is that we're dealing with and what we need. And that's something that really has to happen on a broader basis. The federal government is starting to realize this. Certainly if you're doing research grants and things like that are about disability, they insist on meaningful inclusion. No more just running it by a little focus group and then going on your merry way and say, well, we did that. You can't just check the boxes anymore. You have to actually include people. There is pending legislation on preparing for climate disasters that mandates meaningful inclusion of people with disabilities, because we're not the ones that are going to be very well helped going into normal shelters. And we're the ones that know what we're going to need. So this is what, meaningful inclusion means giving voice to those with the lived experience. Don't assume that we have no idea what we're talking about. And that's one of the problems that we have. I know PhDs with disabilities, I know doctors, I know lawyers, I have a master's. There are a number of people with significant capabilities, and we are almost always automatically dismissed because we have a disability.
I mean, no matter what we're making, policy about, voices of the affected populations should absolutely be included. And I know that, part of our process in the General Assembly is to take testimony, both in person and written from anyone from the public who wishes to share their views, and that is often very powerful. I know that you come up to the State House often to share your perspective, and that is incredibly helpful.
There were
and
a whole bunch of us for that legislation.
Yes, and that's what helps push things forward.
Right.
And then on the implementation end, absolutely the same thing, that we need to be hearing voices. And
right.
So I just want to assure you and your listeners that that there were voices at the table during the implementation process for Ticket to Work to take into account those things.
So some of the feedback I've had is that it's so complex that it's going to be scary again. It's going to be walking a tightrope again. And that's what we need to get away from. We don't need that extra stress.
Yeah. Oh no.
A lot of the things we encounter, if there's any kind of state, involvement in it, the rules get so complicated. It is an absolute stress.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's one of the reasons why with Ticket to Work, they're kind of testing out the system right now and developing the materials, to inform people of how it's going to work, so that to try to avoid any sort of problems. And I'm assured us that they're going to be constantly taking feedback and making things better and better if are issues.
I hope you're right.
And of course, if there's ever anything specific, please reach out. And I am happy to bring it to the people running the program.
Appreciate that.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah,
I have your number now.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the things that I enjoy the most about serving in public office, is that I can be that bridge between people and our state agencies.
Well, that's good. That is good.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to keep that one.
Yeah.
I believe. Because one of the things, and this goes on to the next part, where these poverty enforcing policies that we have. Okay, I'm an economist, so I know we have this poverty level, which was really intended for the purposes of studying, the effects of poverty, and so it's set at this level, so we know that. Okay, it was
like the federal poverty line you're talking about.
Right. It was never intended to be a target. And it becomes a target in policy making. You say, okay, well, if you're over this amount, nope, cut off. And I mean, I know what I've gone through, but I also know many people who have had, for very small amounts of money, have lost critical benefits. And, this is...
Right, they fall off that cliff.
Oh, absolutely. And it's one great big fall, I can tell you that. And it's not easy to unravel it once it's happened. And I know people that won't take raises in their places of employment. They won't take promotions because they're really scared. So I'm really hoping that we can create really meaningful change so that it's working as it should.
Yeah, and I could not agree more with you. People should not live in fear that they are going to lose the benefits that they rely on because they have made $100 too much.
We do every day.
Yes, I know, and that should absolutely not be how it is. And I think that we certainly have more work to do, obviously, to make that true for everyone. And the progress that we are making through the Ticket to Work program, we need to build out supports around it so that any life changes that happen, people don't slide backwards, afterwards. And so and that is work that will be absolutely ongoing, and I'm committed to continuing to do.
Maybe after the age of 65, you could still earn money.
Yes, and that's something that we should talk about.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I've always missed the dates. I gotta tell you. I went to well, you don't need my personal story online. Okay. So, but it has been an issue.
The personal stories are the things that move us forward.
I can tell you offline.
Yeah.
So, okay. So, another one that was passed and signed by the governor, and I guess it was a budget issue, a budget note rather than an actual bill,
Mhm.
that would allow personal care assistants to assist clients if they're hospitalized or in short-term, other confinement. And I know that my PCA, there's a form, I think I showed it to you,
Mhm.
they're required to sign, even if you help out, you cannot get paid for
Mhm.
this. And CMS, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid, allow for this.
Mhm.
In the day of corporate health care, where you are really lucky if you get the care that you're in a hospital for right now, you're not going to get any disability-related care, and it's going to be really hard. So it's necessary to have the PCA available. Besides, our PCAs are so poorly paid. I mean, we raised it, but not to the level it was supposed to be raised. I think it's being raised to a better level, but I'm gonna wait until I
Yeah, I
am
believe
able
that
to-
was, I believe that was included in part of the,
Latest budget.
the latest budget that was, that
Yeah.
we're raising a lot of our,
direct caregivers.
direct
Right.
caregivers,
Yeah, I'm
rates.
hoping, and I'm
Yeah.
hoping then that there's a path for regular raises.
Mhm.
But at any rate, the thing is, they're so fully paid that if they're laid off, they're gonna go.
Yeah.
They're gonna go get a job.
Mhm.
You can't blame them. We lost all of our PCAs for the longest time because nobody was paying them a reasonable wage. They could make more money at McDonald's.
Yeah.
So,
Mhm.
if we lay them off for a hospitalization, they're gone.
Mhm.
Which means then the person, not only have they lost a job and income, and that whole thing about, when people are working, they're paying taxes, they're buying goods and services, that's good for the economy.
It's great.
Instead of just looking at it, oh, it's another expense. No, this is really good. So if they leave, now we've got to find others when we're getting out of the hospital and in need of more care.
Yeah.
And that's really challenging, because it still takes months to find someone after what they did to us by not paying them, not giving them a raise for 18 years.
Yeah.
We lost everybody, just about everybody.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we need to have that back in.
So so when you asked me about this, before, in preparation for this, I did go and find out what was happening with that PCA rule, and the update from BHDDH is that actually very recently, in the last couple of weeks, it has been announced that PCAs can be paid for services that they're providing to their clients while they are in a hospital or nursing home, with the exception, however, that any services that they're providing that would already be provided, like by a hospital, like preparing food, that kind of thing, they can't be reimbursed for. But anything like help communicating, help getting around, that kind of thing.
How about feeding them?
Yes, so that kind of thing, I believe, is covered and reimbursable.
Right. But
And
they've made it very limited, so you better memorize the list so you don't.
And so that's based on the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Services, their rules. But Rhode Island is, brought in line with other states that are allowing the reimbursement of PCAs for people who are in the hospital or nursing home.
Well, that's good. We shouldn't have had to fight that long for it.
Oh.
Again, it was approved by CMS long time ago, and when this did get passed into the budget, EOHHS said, no, that's double dipping, we're not going to do it. And this is the burden we have every time we need something. We have to go through so much, and I'm glad there are people like you that say, wait a minute, wait. Doesn't have to be that way. So there's people like you, Lou De Palma, a couple of others, Alana DeMario. I don't want to leave out any of them. Julie Casimiro, Tina Spears, Arthur Handy. They're all really, worked on it. There are others too, but those are the ones I've personally dealt with. So, okay. So, Olmsted Commission. Okay, so the governor, after the legislation failed, the governor, directed the establishment of the commission. So it's not happening the way it was going to be in the legislation. In the legislation, there was the mandate for meaningful inclusion of people with disabilities. EOHHS is not good at that. And EOHHS has now taken over the process. They held this full day meeting, this stakeholder meeting, where they presented. It's not a stakeholder meeting, it's a sales pitch to people with disabilities. This is what we're doing for you, which is really offensive on so many levels, but it does not allow for real, meaningful inclusion in having a say in what's going on. They did send out ahead of time this survey, and I don't know if you ever saw the survey.
I did not see the survey.
Oh, no. I'll send you a copy of the survey questions. But it was meaningless. Okay, so it was a list of things. What is Rhode Island doing well? And there was a list of 6 or 7 things, and which one are we doing best in this group? And then they're like, there was no choice for none of the above. And they had like 3 questions like that, and then a couple of others. So we lack transportation. I mean, Rhode Island as a whole is such a big mess with transportation, and even worse now that one of our main arteries is out of commission for what, another 2 years at least, right? But what passes for public transportation is kind of weird funding, backwards funding actually, because the more it succeeds, the less funding it has. But also it doesn't really work. Now I know there are some trials of some things going on.
Yeah, there's like the flex program.
Right, the one that they're doing in South County, right?
And there's a program in Newport. I was at a meeting the other day, and they were talking about a program that's happening in on Aquidneck Island, I believe.
Really?
I'll have to look for it and send you information about
Right,
it. But
yeah. I do like the flex idea, because we can't exactly call Uber or Lyft. And I know that they're using it in South County as a trial, and I know about it because it was announced at URI, and they're recommending for a lot of students to use that. I mean, we could save so much money if we didn't have to have our own transportation. If you knew how much our vans cost. It's astounding. But that we have to also be careful of what is used for us. So for example, my car was out of commission for a couple of months last year, and I had to use MTM to go to a couple of doctor visits. First time, it was a side entry van. It was great. I'm there like, okay, I can handle this. This is very good. Second time, it was a rear entry van. Now, if you're in a wheelchair over the axle on the back, which is what is common on ride vans and other things, you're going like this the whole time. And I have a very unstable spine, very unstable trunk. It just took so much out of me. And they're like, I can't do this, because they don't give you the shortest route either. They'll pick up 30 people after they pick you up and drop them off before they drop you off. So we can't have that. We need something that is stable, reliable, and accessible. But the whole state needs it. The whole sate needs it. We're a small state. We should be able to do this.
No, I agree. I agree. We could have a world-class public transportation system for everybody. That works for everyone. Because we are so small.
I did bring this up when I talked with Congressman Amo, and they're like, is there any way we can tap into some of the infrastructure money to really do that and do it well, rather than a piecemeal thing? And he did agree to look into that, because he agrees we need it. He uses the bus sometimes here, actually a number of members of our congressional delegation do. I think they want to, keep in touch with what's going on.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
anyway, so that's we need to make sure that the Olmsted plan is broad-based and works for everyone.
Yeah.
And I'm really concerned about there not being the mandate for meaningful inclusion and making that truly meaningful.
Yeah.
And I don't know if there's any way to get that addressed during the process.
Yeah, so I know, so this, the whole, the executive order, now the establishment of the commission, happened kind of over the summer, the end of the summer, Governor McKee did the executive order. I've not seen a ton of information about it. I do know that, they, believe they are going to be offering grant money to different organizations to hold kind of like they're taking the show on the road kind of thing to hear from people. I don't know what that is actually going to end up looking like, but certainly if you have an organization in mind that could be a good host for one of those sessions, I can help connect you if you'd like to request that.
Maybe I can get the Edward King House to host one here and have people with disabilities from the island and make sure it includes all aspects.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Because I know that there is, because they have staff and organizations, people in the IDD community do have good representation. But other people with disabilities, not so much.
Yeah.
Because, we may belong to, you may belong to the Ocean State Center for Independent Living. You may not belong to an organization. Me, I've just got a big mouth and I will post what I need to right here.
Yeah.
I'm so shy, I'm working on it. But, to be able to, I've attended so many stakeholder meetings with the OHHS, and I have become so jaded, worse every time. I know that when it came to the whole federal mandate for conflict-free case management, they actually created a conflict that didn't exist and put it all in the hands of, all the evaluations in the hands of DHS workers. Well, we don't have many DHS workers.
Yeah.
And they're not able to even keep up with what they're supposed to be keeping up with. And I did attend a meeting, a stakeholder meeting, and I'm going to say it was at least 4 years ago, where they were really bringing, it was really to establish having managed care for dual eligibles. However, they opened the meeting with a presentation about how Rhode Island has a lower per enrollee cost for Medicaid, or expenditure, we should say expenditure, not cost, expenditure for Medicaid than, certainly less than at least half the country. So they were boasting about how low their costs were. And I was on this call and they're like, no, this is really wrong, your priorities are messed up. When we're going without critical services, that is your expenditure, but that's not supposed to be what you're all about.
Yeah. I mean, if you're keeping costs down because of maybe efficiency, sure. But if you're not, if it's because people aren't getting the services they need, I can't really speak to that. But I mean, if that's the case, then that's not.
It was because they were still refusing to pay PCAs more, and we had no PCAs, and that, I got to tell you, was a very trying time for those of us that needed them. Very trying. Because a lot of the home care agencies had also lost their staff for the same reason. And every time they talk about a surplus, and then they're like, you don't have a surplus. You're not providing services. And that's really important part to listen to.
Yeah.
Now they're trying to say they never said any of that. However, there were other people on the call. I was not the only one.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm worried about their priorities, and I'm worried about how, while they were getting bonuses at that time for getting their COVID shots, or they changed the language of it afterwards, but they were getting bonuses while we were not getting services. And I think that we need to consider at some point where their raises get tied into Medicaid rates. If you're willing to evaluate Medicaid rates and raise them appropriately for cost of living. The other thing, that I was going to say was that the issue of prior approvals, prior authorizations.
Mm-hmm.
I know Medicare requires them, Medicaid requires them. One of the, Rhode Island requires them more than other people. What a surprise. There are vendors that don't want to do business in Rhode Island because of how hard it is to get paid.
Mm-hmm.
In particular, if you have really challenging durable medical equipment,
Mm-hmm.
Medicaid may approve the purchase, but then you have to go through the prior every time you need a repair. You would think they would want to, they've approved the equipment,
Yeah.
so they know it's needed.
Mm-hmm.
You'd think they'd want to protect their investment.
Mm-hmm.
But there are companies that, I've dealt with, they say, oh God, we hate doing Rhode Island, please don't give us another referral,
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that.
Yeah.
And, it's really, again, it's a burden that we should not be bearing.
Yeah.
And this is something that I think really needs to be changed.
Yeah. And you shouldn't have to wait a long time for your, for your medical equipment to get to have it be repaired.
Oh.
And get back to function.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did get legislation passed about that a couple of years ago,
Uh-huh.
but we're going to have to amend it to be a bit more forceful.
Okay.
Because it is still really challenging.
Great, and I'm happy to help with any efforts
Okay.
in that front.
Good, I'll let the Governor's Commission know.
Great.
Because they'll be working on it.
Okay.
So,
Wonderful.
all right, do you have any other disability issues you're ready to discuss? Do you want to bring up?
Ooh, let's see. None off the top of my head, but I guess I'll just take the opportunity to say that there are, at the top you said that people don't like talking about disability issues in policy, and I think that I think some people are maybe afraid of saying the wrong thing, or I'm not providing excuses, that kind of thing. But the more that we do talk about it, the more that it invites other people to talk about it, and we are anybody can become disabled at any time.
Anytime. We have open enrollment year-round.
Yes, and so it's something that everybody should care about and should talk about.
Exactly.
Whether or not they have are personally affected, whether or not they have a family member or friend that's personally affected.
Right.
It is something that will eventually affect all of us.
It will.
Mm-hmm.
The late great Judy Euban, I don't know if you knew who she was. I'll have to get you some information on her. She was great, awesome person.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, we no longer refer to people as able-bodied. We refer to people that are not disabled as not yet disabled.
Mm-hmm.
Because the truth is, the older you get, the more likely it is you will incur some disability.
Uh-huh.
But it does affect everybody.
Yeah.
And that might be part of the fear of talking about it.
Yeah.
The other thing is, and something we face all the time is, what do they want now? What's this going to cost?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God, we can't. And they don't realize
Mm-hmm.
that it's not a cost, it's an investment.
Yeah.
And cities and towns and states need to realize that if you remove barriers so that we can live our lives, technology allows us to do a lot of things we could not do in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an investment, because you're going to pay these benefits if we're not working.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So if we're working,
Mm-hmm.
and you still pay them. We're paying taxes, which is helping. We're buying goods and services, which means other people are working, and if they're working, they're paying taxes and buying goods and services, etc.
Yeah.
You know, it's Econ 101. I mean, it's the basics of what drives economy.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they shouldn't look at us as just a burden. We do contribute.
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
I mean, we're not
Yeah.
all Stephen Hawking or John Nash, but you know,
Yeah.
there are.
Yeah.
We do stuff.
Yes, absolutely. And you know, and quite frankly, there, you know, with a lot of sectors that come, you know, asking for investment don't get that kind of reaction. They don't, you know, they're like, oh yes, well that's very important. You know, we should invest in that. And so I think that you know, people asking for you know, to be treated just like everybody else and get the supports they need. It should be that should be met with a yes, we should do whatever we can.
Yeah, we should, because we do contribute.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we are. So, well, I thank you so much, Senator Valverde, for joining me today. You know, people with disabilities need to have our voices heard, and I appreciate that you listened and you've been helping make that happen. Okay, so thank you for listening. I'm Annette Bourbonnier from Nothing Without Us, stories and discussions of meaningful inclusion. Please hit the subscribe button and give us a thumbs up. That and your comments will help us grow. Tell us who you want to hear from and what issues you want to hear about. I will be happy to forward any questions you have for Senator Valverde to her. And make sure you check out the earlier interviews with Senator Whitehouse, our congressman, a recent interview with Senator Pierce, and some other candidates that are still posted as part of this series. Tell your friends about us so we can grow. You can find us on patreon.com and on YouTube, and you can follow me on LinkedIn, X, formerly known as Twitter, Instagram, and Threads. Remember, our democracy this year more than ever depends on everyone getting out and voting. This is our power, it's our right, it's our responsibility. And you can't complain about the results unless you do. We need you. Go do it. Thanks so much. Till the next Nothing Without Us. I'm Annette.